How's it going, everyone? Welcome to part 3 of forging our Seax here. So give me about 2 minutes of your time just to set you up for what you're about to see, because I'm going to do voiceover, I'm going to do drawing giant diagrams and all that fun stuff, but this first part's really important because I'm going to talk about, again, what you're going to see in this, and also the rounding hammer. And those that are not experienced in bladesmithing, blacksmithing, this is important information before you see the video. Again, I want to set you up for success in doing this. So starting with what you're going to see. The overall of the video is going to be continuing to draw the blade out to the length that we have here, focusing on the apex of the back of the broken back Seax, and then setting up for the next part of this tutorial, the tang. And so what you're going to see first is me focusing on the nose or the tip of the blade here and creating a little bit of that narrow before we do our final profiling later in the series. But I want to show you we're going to be using the rounding hammer, and we're going to use both sides of this, but you're going to see me use the actual rounding part of it, and this is important to understand, okay? A couple things here. If you're not experienced, a rounding hammer is a great thing to use, but if you use it incorrectly, it is costly, and a lot of times you cannot correct it. Starting with heat, you can see, and you've seen thus far in the video, I keep my steel relatively hot. And the reason for that is because you don't want stress fractures. You don't want cracks when you quench your blade or in the initial forging process. So you want to keep your steel fairly hot. And when you're using a rounding hammer especially, because that's going to do the most damage if you hit your steel too cold, because how a rounding hammer works is you're creating an indentation and it's spreading material out. So imagine if your steel is too cold for that steel to move. Physics shows us that force has to go somewhere, and that's just going to, I mean, if you hit a cold piece of mild steel, you can see what it does. Eventually you're going to see a crack. It's the same thing with hot steel. But if you use it correctly and you're not just focusing on one spot, you'll actually spread material out, and that'll give you the opportunity to narrow it, as you'll see here, as I said. But if you hit it all in one spot, you're going to create a thin spot in your blade. So you have to hit it in 4 different areas, as you're going to see in the drawn diagram here. And then we go to the flats. You don't want to just use the rounding side, you want to use your flats as well, and then you go back to your spine and you draw things out. So with that being said, guys, enjoy part 3. Here we go. Okay, so I'm using the rounding part of my hammer on the spine. And the reason for this is I'm kind of doing, it's already a thickened area, and I'm just kind of making some more indentations, and I'm doing some pre-hammering right here as well. Just kind of preparing for the tapering process, and that is you want to thicken your steel before you thin it, and this is how you do it. Now, I'm not focusing in one area just yet. I'm cleaning my steel and I'm preparing for that. A lot of times you're doing a lot of setup before you go. You see here I'm motioning, I'm going to be focusing on an area, and we are going to start the tapering or narrowing process of the spine. And I draw a line, which I think is very important to do, because again, it helps you focus in the area. You can see we're really thick right here, and we want to have things flow a little bit. And like I said in the intro here, this is what a rounding hammer does to the steel. And I would recommend pausing this. And this is what we're going for. We're going to be hitting in 3 to 4 different areas and flip it and do it again, and then get a heat in and repeat as necessary. So using my rounding hammer, and we're going to start with the tip, and it's kind of hard to pick up on camera, but I'm actually moving it in different areas. You can kind of see right there, and then flip it. And you want to do this if you can in one heat, because you're going to give more justice to moving the steel, or you're going to give the steel justice to moving, I should say. And I'm going to repeat and do it again. And I'll be honest, some of this, some work I do off camera. You have to be the person that determines, have you moved enough steel? Is it as thin as you want it to be, or did you get the taper you were going for? Because you are the one with the hammer, not me. And I can show you right here as in this video that it's thinned out, and we're going to continue. Now we're going to move to the flat side of the hammer, because you want to smooth all those super deep impressions out, and now you're spreading material. If you go back to the diagram, you actually see that the steel kind of, I try to draw it in anyways, it kind of moves out. and now you want to move things back into a shape with smoothness on your steel. Again, keeping your steel clean also means keeping it flat and clean. You can see we've thinned it out quite a bit in just those couple heats, and I think off camera I did maybe 2 additional heats, if that. And now we're going back, and as I said, where you hit the spine with the rounding hammer, and now we're going with the flats, and we're moving things back into shape. And you can really see that the nose or the tip of the blade is really taking form. And a lot of this, guys, is repeat. You're doing a step and you're repeating, or you're going back to it. That's just part of bladesmithing. I don't know in the 7 years if I've ever just focused on completely one area. Now I'm talking about, I motioned that we're going to be focusing on the spine. And what we're trying to do here is get the length that we're desiring. And I'm pretty sure right here I was using the rounding end because a rounding end is going to force more material. You will create that taco, as I talked about in the second part, and you just got to make sure you hit those flats and half face your steel. And they'll come out. And as I said, I do some work off camera, but keep the steel clean, keep it hot, especially if you're using the rounding hammer. Really easy to put stress fractures and cold shuts, and you'll have cracks and no fun. Now I'm going back to my flat side of the hammer, and we're smoothing things out. As I said, it's a lot of bladesmithing is you're doing a step and you're repeating a step until you have the desired length, shape, form, or whatever. One of the lessons my bladesmith teacher or blacksmith teacher taught me, Doug Lockhart in Ohio, one more swing of the hammer just makes more of a difference. So here I'm measuring the overall, and if you remember in the second part I said between 7 and 8, and I believe this is at 7.5. And now I'm going to be focusing on how long the blade is, which is at 5.5 inches is my goal. And I marked it here on the anvil if you can pay attention where kind of that mouse hole is. And we'll see here if we made those parameters. And again, if you're following this, or trying to, you'll have similar results. Again, you're the one with the hammer. If you're following instruction, and as you see, I made my goal. And the reason why I'm doing this is because now, as I said, we started to form where the narrow on the back side of the spine is going to be. Now we have to flow everything out because it's still too wide, and it's thick in some areas. So we go back and smooth that out. I did that off camera. It's the same steps that you just saw, and now I'm just trying to make the nose flow better with the whole part of the steel. And I did make a mistake. I said that you don't want to bring your hammer to the steel, you want to bring the steel to the hammer. You can see I hit towards the sharp edge of the anvil, or sorry, the rounding edge of the anvil, and I kind of created an indentation and a bend. But just remember, bring your steel to the hammer. Now, I motioned that we're going to do some more thinning, and this is important to use is the horn. And again, keep your steel hot, move your steel back and forth, because what it's going to do, as you see in this diagram right here, is it's going to spread material and create basically little line crater things. And I don't know how else to explain it, but this is important to keep your steel hot. I'm going to be using the flat side of the hammer. I wouldn't recommend using the rounding side of the hammer. Some people do. It's just you have less control of your spread, and if you're doing a thinner part of the knife, you can blow out your steel or create stress fractures and stuff like that. You can see I'm just doing little hits, and then I'm going to straighten things out. Your goal should always be to have a straight blade before you put it in the fire again. And sometimes it doesn't happen, and sometimes it does, but it should always be in your mind because it's an easier finish at the end. If you let your steel get out of control, you lose control of your design and your shape, and you have to put more stress in the steel. As I said, I'm trying to keep things flat and to the shape that I'm going for. And you don't have to do a lot of heats on the horn, but you can see just by what you've seen so far, there's quite a difference. Now my favorite tool, the whack-a-mole stick. The stick, a piece of wood that's tough can have a lot of force behind it with not a lot of energy transferring into the steel as far as impressions and indentations. Using a piece of wood can do justice for straightening and flattening things. So, all right, guys, part 3, the blade really starts to take shape. Stay tuned. My name is Nathaniel Winger. Born in Ohio, raised in Colorado. Being a bladesmith for 7 years, I can tell you, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here, but I'm chasing quality products for the end user and or for custom orders for my clients that make sense to what they're trying to use it for. In the time of bladesmithing, I've learned that 90% on the anvil means 90% less time on the grinder. Everything is hypothetical until sharpened and then sheathed. And if I truly want something unique and quality, handmade is the way to do it. Welcome, Colorado Custom Leather and Blades.